This presentation is not meant to be about rules and regulations, but rather a more lighthearted talk about what we're doing at the university about data management in the context of responsible conduct of research. I don't know how many of you are aware or have read last month HKU Bulletin, the cover story. Anybody? Only one. Okay. Two. Yes. The cover story is about data, big data, the pros and cons, and what the university is doing about it. So, data management is high at the university agenda. So let me begin by making an assessment of your management style, okay? So how many of you have an office looking like this? Wow, okay, I know Meha has. A few hands. So you are extremely organized, right? Either that or you have someone who's really organizing you, okay? I think Lex's office will look like that because I know he's an extremely organized person. Right? Hands up whose office look like this. A few. Oh, God forbid, look like this. Right. I do actually have a few colleagues with offices like this. Maybe not to the extent of the last one, but there are offices where there are growth on either side. There's a garden path that leads to the desk, and you sit in front of the computer. Now, they can assure me that anything that they want, they can find, provided you don't move anything, right? And they've been like that for decades. And it's probably true. But if anything happens, it'll be disaster. But I think for many of us, our offices is probably somewhere in between. And it's probably, is mine also. Managing data is a real issue. It's really because the amount of data that we have to deal with on a daily basis is increasing exponentially every day. For me, I could easily have an experiment that generates a terabyte of data. And that sometimes to me is quite scary when I have to manage, hundreds of terabytes of data. It is almost impossible to try to imagine how I could deal with that sort of issue. And in many cases of research misconduct, unfortunately, it does lead to some form or some areas of poor data management or a lack of understanding of data management. Because when challenged, you need to come up with the original data. Okay? Quite often call yourself, okay, you know what, I've destroyed it. The student taken it away. The dog ate it, whatever. So while we all aspire to get these sort of 4- and 3-star publications, which our university want, don't forget the data. Manage your data well, such that if there's any events that you need to come up with that raw data, it can be easily identified. So there are international funding agents, and there are many, and also international institutions already has established the policies and infrastructures for effective data management. RGC don't have that requirement, but as a education of responsible conduct of research at HKU have initiated, taken the initiative to have a policy on data management, and we are building infrastructure to help you with that process. The data management policy is adapted from the University of Oxford. And I like this little diagram because it really does illustrate the key issue about data management in terms of planning, sharing and archiving, and also backup and security. But in the middle of that is training and advice and support. And this is what we are trying to offer here at the University of Hong Kong. Now, what constitutes data sometimes a little bit unclear, in particular to students and some of the junior investigators. So the classic data in terms of facts, numbers, and symbols that generate graphs and tables and so forth, they can easily understand. But when it comes to other things like samples, images, videos, it's not so clear to them. So, but all these sort of, illustrates the eventual outcome of an experiment. So for me, in the biomedical field, I work with mice. I generate different mouse models for human diseases. These are data for me. If I've been questioned whether I've made such a mouse, I have to provide evidence of this mouse. Okay, it exists, and there it is. Right? I can't destroy it. I have to store it away. Okay, I can store it away, I can freeze it, the embryo, or I can give it to the Jackson lab so that there's a permanent record of it. Or I modify viruses and bacteria. These are data. I need to show evidence that they exist. So these are from the perspective of data. But there are also many other aspects that relate to data that we tend to forget. And this really relates to reproducibility in a lot of ways. That means is that how are these data being collected? In what context is it collected? What is the structure and organization of the data file? And where do they come from? Right? Were there any validation or quality assurance being procedures carried out for this data? And has this data been transformed in any way before you used it? So this information is necessary and important as part of your data management processes so that it is validatable. Further to that, there's also in many instances when you initiate a project, there could be lots of correspondence between different authors, the generation of ideas, the agreement of authorships and so forth. So these are important documentation that you should think about keeping and maintaining a proper record of this. Okay, material transfer agreement. And for those who are working with human data, it is important that you keep a record of your IRB and the consent form. If you say your experiment that you have a 600 people in your cohort, you better have 600 consent forms somewhere there, right? Okay? So the consent form you need to keep and do not destroy it. And of course, related to that is the information about confidentiality and access and use information. Okay. Now, you need to treat data with tender loving care. It's not inert, but you need to own it, manage it, secure it, update it, and share. Now, sharing is, to me, is an extremely important part of that because I think data has value. It may have immediate value, but it also have long-term values. And as investigators, we are the primary stewards of the data. So making sure that what we can use now could be available for the future, okay? Because the data set has value in the long term. Now, in terms of responsibility, there are different levels of responsibilities. There is responsibility at the research level. So whether you be a student, postdoc, or a PI, you have your responsibility of managing your research data. So as a PI, I think it would be really important that in your lab, that you should establish clear house procedures in terms of how your data in your lab should be managed. So that one researcher doesn't have a completely different way of managing data such that it is a little bit mess when you try to come and try to sort out the data if you need to look at that data. So if there's a common set of house rules, that would help. It's not easy, I know. I tried it in my lab and everybody does it slightly differently. But at the end of the day, there need to be some common procedures such that we can follow where the data are and where the samples are. So that is really essential. So develop clear house procedures for the collection, storage, and reuse. And more importantly, destruction of data. Now, personally, I don't think we should destroy data, but there are situations where one need to destroy data. And you need to set that, make it very clear right from the start. Personally, I believe data is valuable long-term process. If you can keep your data, I would strongly suggest that you should try to keep this data and store it somewhere. And there is places where you can do that, either on the cloud or at the university facilities. Okay, so this comes down to the requirement now at the University of Hong Kong for a data management plan. Okay. So at the university level, we have responsibility to provide storage, and there are now storage facility located within the main library for the backup, deposit, retention of research data. Our university is now providing access to training, support and advice for research data and record management. And the university main library are offering courses that you can attend to facilitate your understanding and the usage procedures. And so these facilities are there available. So a repository is now available at the Hong Kong U main library. The Hong Kong U policy on data management is available for you to take a look at the Research Services website. Like I said before, it's an adapted version from the University of Oxford with consent, and it was approved in Senate in 2015, and we've implemented that policy since. The major point cover is something that we've already talked about a little bit earlier, but it's to do about accuracy, complete, authentic, and reliability of your data, to ensure that it's identifiable, retrievable, and available when it's needed. Okay. It is secure, safe, and kept in compliance with the legal obligations, and so forth. So the research data service, there are information available at the Hong Kong U Library website. So if you Google data management, you will find it. So the relevant information are there, the relevant forms are there, and so forth. And there are recommendations for you to think about data management before you start a project, during your project, as well as after a project. So for those who have taken research postgraduate students, from September 2017, this group of students are required to submit a research data management plan before their degree is being confirmed. Okay, so they will come to you for advice. So therefore, I would strongly advise you to look at the data management plan. What is it all about? And you can then advise them. There are also facilities where video has been made. These are just dialogues between staff and students and so forth, just to help you to understand what we're doing at the university level. The dialogue between actually, this is a video that John Bacon-Sean made with one of the medical students. I think this is a video now it's available. You can click on it and have a listen to what John has to say and what sort of questions the research postgraduate student poses. And the other videos, I believe, is in progress. Okay. So the data management plan is not a complicated plan. So really, it just deal with how will the data be collected, how will it be documented, who can access it, where it will be stored, who will perform the backup, so forth and so forth. Right? These are simple things that you fill in and that help you to manage your project as well too. So I will finish with a couple more slides. And like Lex, I plead that we should advocate good science. We should lead by example, because I think good data management plan is part of practicing good science. Now, when I talk about data management at the research postgraduate court workshops, they will complain how tedious it is to manage the data. I suggested to them that they should do this on a regular basis, on a daily basis, okay? The necessary information that they should write down in the workbooks and so forth, they find it extremely tedious and repetition. But it is important. So therefore, as supervisors to students, you need to create that environment in your lab such that that is part of that practice. Yeah? That part of the routine, sort of, you don't have to think about it. This is what you need to do and so forth. Okay? Because it is important to prove, disprove, justify, or counter a body of research. Okay? And lastly, I don't know how many of you practice the keeping of a workbook. It is very important in my lab, and therefore I encourage them to write things down. It's more of a journal of their daily activities. And they need to do that. They need to note everything they've done. They need to note errors that they've made. They need to note experiments that doesn't work, because in a lot of cases, the failed experiments could be the most important experiments. And we need to teach them the importance of recognizing the unexpected results. Okay, so I won't go on this much more, so I hope it is useful, that you get an understanding what we're doing in Hong Kong U about data management and what sort of facility we're offering to help you along the process. So thank you.